So, hi, my name is Espen Jørgensen. By the way, should I take this in English or is it okay with Norwegian? I guess there are some English-speaking people here. Yes, it is. Okay, I'll do it in English then. Hi, Espen. I'm from X Design. I'm currently the head of Ocean Space in X Design. And I'm also a lead designer and part of the founding team of X Design. And well, I guess my story started with these small things. Anyone can see what they are? Yeah, something which is something related to allergia, pollen. It's you know, the small things that makes you go sneeze. And this was my childhood's nightmare, which ended up inside a workshop during the whole summer while the kids were out playing. But luckily this workshop was like a small magic heaven for me, because there was all these tools and all these things I can dream up and I can just make things. And I think my kind of career started there in that tool shop every summer, ending up as a designer today, having worked with quite many companies on both physical design, digital design, service design, and quite many innovation projects as well. So taking that tool shop thing into the world, I think it's been a good journey. 2 words about X Design. We are Norway's largest and leading design consultancy. We are still independent, diverse, and international, with offices in Copenhagen and Brazil, and Oslo, Trondheim, and Stavanger. And we've been working with quite many customers in quite many industries, from ocean to health, bank and finance, to different industries, and loads of retail, and of course loads of startups and scale-ups as well. Not going to talk much about that today, but are of course going to show you some examples relating to the topic of today. But we are counting about 90, closing in on 100 professionals, different types of designers mainly, but we also do have some tech developers to help us designers develop more, well, better products basically, which are more easier to implement and get out in the market. Yeah, want some prizes, as always, nice. But today's topic is designing for consumers, succeeding with professionals. And to start this off, I think I have to just start with this one. Anyone can guess what's going to pop up on this side? Yeah, could be, yeah. And I guess that's like the almost a cliche of an example when it comes to someone who kind of focuses on user experience instead of features and having success. Even though, of course, the Nokia was a pure business phone made for professionals. And of course, the iPhone wasn't that. It was severely lacking loads of functionality, which you would think professionals would need. But of course, they just abandoned the iPhone. The Nokia, for the flow, feel of the iPhone, and of course, the kind of identity that goes with it. Has leveled a bit out, but I think that was like a bombshell when it comes to user experience beating feature and tech focus. Winner on this one. So that brings me a bit back to you see the same pollen here, and there's something called cross-pollination. And that's quite important, both for me and I think for the design industry and the tech industry, and also for innovation. Because quite many times you kind of, work in loads of different disciplines, and you bring ideas from one discipline to another, between startups into big corporations, between business to consumers and business to business, which I'm going to talk about today. And of course, between like service design, product design, health, retail, etc., etc. And we're quite aware of this in X Design, because that's I think this is a fuel that always takes us forward. So that's the kind of the backdrop for today. And let's dive down. Professional versus consumers. Of course, it has been somewhat a divide in this area. It's also called enterprise applications, control room, it's for professional users. It's a whole range, of course. I'm going to come back to that. But you got those on one side, which is own kind of, way of working, aesthetics, functionality, what's important, what the budgets are. how the market is, how the business models work, and it kind of have dictated this market. And of course, loads of legacy as well. And then, of course, you have the consumers, a bit different. Checked up on Wikipedia, and it's quite striking because, well, this kind of software should satisfy the needs of an organization rather than the individual users. I would argue that an organization kind of consists of individual users, and a shift in this idea would maybe be beneficial. But these are old things. Things are shifting. Because what used to be the focus for professional enterprises, like compliance, manageability, robustness, security, well, that's a baseline. Where, of course, tech understanding and business understanding is really important. Of course, usability and efficiency is coming up as important as well. It's the reason why you have these tools, because you're going to use them for something in an efficient manner. So let's look a bit in detail on this kind of division here, because I think this is the bit of the key. Just going to spool quite fast through it. So we have on the one side, you have kind of the design and developing products for professionals, and on the other side, designing for consumers. And of course, when it comes to the user, I guess that's the great difference. That the customer is not the user on the professional side, while the customer is the user on the consumer side. And of course, you have them trained versus casual, and of course, you need, of course, some training and support, and that's something you bring to the table when you develop, often when you develop professional applications. Further on, there are, of course, fewer customers, the more revenue each customers, and it's often sale-driven. With key accounts, you work with the CEO, and not something that usually where they just find you online and just buy your products and services. Of course, it has been changing. When it comes to the UX UI, what's going on in the application? On one side, for the professional side, is of course important with the awareness and flow, that you actually are aware of critical alerts and you get the flow which aligns with your objectives and your workflow. And of course, performance and safety, and it's often quite complex and a bit controlled, of course. And we often talk about dull screens when it comes to professional applications. Well, of course, on the other side, it's vivid, it's often call to action, it's all about experience and consumption, and it's quite simple, focused, and open. And the last one, when it comes to how you rig development teams and design teams for two kind of different professionals and consumers. On one side, it's, of course, I think this is a big difference. It's customer driven. For professionals, you can just go out, ask the customer, what do you want to improve? He'll reply something, I want to improve this, more of this. And you get like a spec. And you can work on the spec and deliver something which the customer is pretty happy with. We improved something. This doesn't work with consumer design. Here you actually have to kind of go out and, well, be inspired and try to interpret what the user actually would want someday and guess on this. So it's a bit of a different game. And of course, for the professional side, my experience that they are a bit slower. It's a bit fewer cycles. Since you don't know that much on this side, you want to publish as fast as possible and start learning. Well, that's maybe more critical because of legacy, because of rules, regulations, etc. So they're quite, well, as you see, looks like a huge divide between these two. Yeah, I'll come back to that one later on. However, things are changing because the last, well, I guess years, from when I started like 15 years ago, things have evolved very much. I think things have evolved quite much the last 5 years as well. So the lines are blurring. So the idea from instead of writing professional versus consumer, I think it's about time to think professional combined with consumer approach to professional applications. So the lines are blurring and the industry is maturing. And I guess the most, the strongest driving force is, of course, increasing expectations. We all have digital stuff now. It doesn't cost next to nothing, it's almost free, and it gives you these really, really good user experiences. Why can't I have this at work? Why does it have to be so cumbersome, so hard, loads of training? This is a huge driving force. And you want, of course, instant value. And the last thing, you want sense of mastery and satisfaction. That's, of course, an important part of any man's job. And there are lower barriers for switching. You got the cloud now. There are no like huge disks and CDs and a server in the basement, and it's really available. And it costs next to nothing. And of course, there's a low threshold for starting using things as well, checking out. And this has led to that you have more flexible policies. It's allowed to bring your own device, or you as a user are allowed to influence, maybe decide as well, what kind of tools you and your team should use in order to perform your job most efficiently. Of course, not necessarily for like control rooms in nuclear plants, but yeah, we'll come back to that. And we see, of course, that there is an overlap between somewhat your professional life and your work life. Your identity is like switching between these two. And this, of course, also is somewhat a driving force when it comes to expectations you have for the things you do at job. So in order to retain the best people, investing in good tools that are actually taking the people seriously instead of just providing them with something which feels cumbersome, might be a good investment. And of course, this is happening, and it has happened in loads of businesses. So you see this shift, from where the good old players are kind of on, well, they're not struggling. They still have a firm grip of some of the market, but they've been challenged. And of course, it's not like that UX and user experience when it comes to the professional applications and marketplaces is no longer an afterthought. So, why should we care? How can we use this? How could we, benefit from it? Maybe make better things? So, of course, that's the top reason. I guess adopting a bit different methodology than the old one will, of course, mean that you create better products and services that brings more value and save cost. That's the easy thing. And I also would say that bringing in this kind of consumer perspective into the development cycle, it kind of fosters innovation because it's a new way of looking at things, seeking answers and seeking inspiration. Not necessarily just asking and doing, but is observing, interpreting, and then thinking, okay, what would be the solution that the customer doesn't suggest, but he actually wants. And of course, that's increased sales and potentially new markets as well. I'm going to show a case later on, which kind of shows this, where you, by doing something differently, opens up new markets that you didn't think of before. And of course, it's about stronger brand. And if you have a good product, you get more loyal users and customers. You don't get switched out with something which is better than you. And I think maybe, who in this room has kind of a technical background? Okay, just mapping out. And I would claim that it would be nice to kind of stop wasting valuable tech resources on, we call it featureitis, features that you add to a product so that the sales team can, put something on the sheet which actually the user doesn't want or doesn't use or doesn't add value to the product. It's a waste of resources instead of actually focusing on things that actually matter. So that's my take on this. And of course, the last one is tackling the increasing complexity. Because what we see, of course, is that things are becoming more complex. Things are kind of interconnected. You get the AI part, which feeds in loads. You get access to all this data, and all people want access to this data to make decisions faster. They want to be connected. They want to share that information, etc., etc. And of course, you got the security and all the other things on top of this. Things are, increasing in complexity. And I think there are ways of dealing with complexity, bringing also in some, I call it consumer thinking, that could be beneficial, instead of kind of beating complexity with adding yet another function that should kind of cater for this complexity. So I guess that's pretty much sums up why you should care. It's more money, save costs, and I think also you can, it's more gratifying to actually deliver products that are being used and you see that people actually are happy with the things they get. So we kind of move from this picture, where usability and efficiency is of course on the table. This is today. And I see that we're kind of moving into a place where a sense of mastery and satisfaction are like the pinnacle of this pyramid. Even at work, that's important. It's not just your paycheck that matters. It's actually that you feel that you're actually doing a good job, and the tools that you have are actually something that brings value into your work life. And of course, the big companies are doing so. There are loads of examples of, I would say, kind of consumer-inspired, or companies that are originating from the consumer world as well, like Dropbox. I would say maybe Google as well. At least Facebook, of course, that's a consumer product moving into the business world. And the list goes on. And these, of course, have the benefit of having this kind of, culture of making good user experiences. But of course, they have some challenges when it comes to kind of scaling it and making it adapt into kind of niche markets. I guess these are, of course, not after the niche markets either. So, loads of upsides, but of course, there are some pitfalls as well. Just going to list those up before I dive into the cases, which I think it's a bit more fun because they can get a kind of some examples of how we've been working on with aspects of this. Boom. Okay. First thing, what we often face is that what we deliver, well, it used to be like 10 years ago, design was the glazing. We kind of just realized that this thing wasn't going to fly. Come in, help us, shine it up a bit, take away some friction. That's not a way to do it. It costs as much. It kind of doubles the cost because you have to develop the features, all the features, and then you have to kind of fix the things afterwards. So it's much better to kind of evolve early so we can work on the big picture, on the what and why early on, together with tech developers, business people, sales, marketing, etc. And of course, pitfall number 2 is reducing performance, security, and robustness. It's the kind of pushing the consumer envelope too far. Making a product that's actually, feasible for professional use. And I guess it relates to the same thing under there as well, dumbing and oversimplification. Professional applications, they serve a purpose. They have this inherent kind of complexity, but it needs to be sorted out. Not necessarily by removing functionality, but maybe by prioritizing it, organizing it, and making sure that it's accessible and a kind of gradually being disclosed. And designers are always eager to innovate, come up with new things. And that's something which I think requires a bit of maturity, not to kind of over-innovate, rethink all the wheels on the wagon. Pick your fights. A good thing there is, I think I got an example later on, is, for example, Google G Suite, the word processor which Google has. It's kind of the same as the one we used to, like the classical word processing schemes. And of course, there's a reason for that. They just wanted to kind of comply with the usability patterns, make sure that everyone felt at home. But the sharing part, that's new. That's where they kind of put their inventive powers into. So you kind of have to, be sure where you want to innovate and where you want to comply with rules, patterns, and the expectations in the market and with the users that you're catering for. Which brings me over to the other one, which is tech legacy and resistance to change. I guess it's kind of the same. It's the other effect is that you feel the resistance and you kind of back off. Because if you ask people, they don't want to change. They want to have it use the same kind of workarounds they have been using. But if you push it and then present it and maybe, try it out, they say, wow, how could I do it the way we've always done it before? This is so much better. So that's the way of kind of pushing things the right way. And what we often see, which is a challenge, not often, but I think it could happen, is that you got teams that are not aligned on ambitions and priorities. And the cure for this is that you don't do the silo, where you kind of toss the design specification over to the tech developer, and then you have to start up as one team, bridging all the experts from sales and marketing to designers to tech developers, and maybe bring in some external customers as well, and align on those ambitions from the beginning. The last one, of course, I guess, is relating to if you stop asking your customers. Well, usually you ask the customers, you get an answer what they want to improve, and you do it. But of course, if that's not necessarily the right method, it's a different kind of method to kind of ask and then interpret and do things you think your customers would like you to do. So this requires a much more deeper understanding of what their actual objectives are, what its job context, how the business works, etc., etc. Because you don't just get the specification, you have to define the specification yourself. It's definitely a pitfall, but of course, bringing in people who have done before it helps. And of course, you got this wide span from kind of, nuclear control room, not apps, but applications, systems, work apps, collaboration tools, personal tools, like company web, e-commerce, and then down to the consumer apps, to entertainment, marketing, etc. And I would say that there is some kind of span in the middle here, where you see these kind of shifts, where the lines are blurring, and where you can add this kind of thinking or approach to designing for professional users at some extent. So I've kind of divided it, not in 50, but simplified it a bit. So I selected kind of 2 or 3, which I'll show you some examples from. So the first one is, I guess, the most typical one. It's designing for professionals with inspiration from consumers. Your whole intention is to actually make a professional product. Of course, there's a span here from kind of pushing the envelope really hard, almost designing a consumer product for professionals, but still from the beginning that this is going to be a professional product. And then of course, it's the other way around, which I'm not going to cover today, but I think it's interesting to bring it up. It's actually the consumer products. Those are made for customers, but kind of inspired and share some kind of professional heritage. So that's the flip side. Not going to dive into that one today, but this one is interesting, I think. It's the kind of the extreme version. Doesn't, of course, necessarily apply to the control room application, but it's products that actually you start off thinking, we're going to aim for consumers. That's our market. So we design a consumer product, but at the same time, you kind of say, okay, if we also kind of make sure that this has the performance and kind of the underlying, technology and design patterns, etc., it could open up some professional markets as well, which could prove lucrative. I think that's the thing I'm going to talk most about today. So, stories. 20 minutes left, isn't it? Yeah. First off, I got 4 stories, going to be quite quick on these. 2 from the first one, where we have kind of a professional system, but of course, where we tried to use some, consumer design to elevate and make the project more successful than necessarily would have been without it. So I think the first one, it has been presented here before. I think it's such a wonderful case that I want to do it briefly again. Not this one. This one is good as well, of course, but the next one. But the first one is a hardware case, and I guess this is a software room, but I think it's quite relevant anyway. It's Pixavi, where we designed their first explosion-proof smartphone, and they started out with this vision. Kind of an EX smartphone with the look, feel, and behavior of the phone you use at home. Because, usually you can't bring your phone out to the old platform. You have to leave it on land, because you need an explosion-proof one. And they look like this. These are kind of rugged, professional. I guess that's a Windows OS something, and that one, the rest are like legacy systems. Far off, you know. It's so basically trying to design something which is as close to the, well, normal smartphone when it comes to shape, size, functionality. It has Android. That was the idea, normalizing things, making basically a consumer product, but then innovating on the features that actually required for professionals. Robustness, all the things, requirements when it comes to the EX and explosion proofness, and some extra features with extra cameras because it's used more for inspection and documentation. But basically, the basic use is, it's a smartphone. I know this. Not a 2 days course and training and then you forget it. So I guess this is about removing things. It's not about adding loads of design in order to actually make a nice product, which is more user-friendly, more attractive, and actually proven to be a great success as well. And they kind of compare themselves with, you know, smartphones, even though it's a special one. It's won some prizes. So that's the takeaway on the well, small clip on Bartek Pixavi here. Good sales, great user satisfaction, opening new markets, of course, because this is not the oil phone. It could be used in different fields as well, and it looks quite normal. So by adopting this kind of approach, we opened up new market, and they were acquired by Bartek. So it's kind of a huge success for that company and the owners. So case number 2. Ulstein. Speed up a bit. Ulstein. They're quite familiar. Well, not familiar, but well known for their boats with this special shape. It's called the X-Bow, which is quite a strong brand in their market, and they're very brand aware. Especially Tore, the manager himself. He's a visionary guy who saw that, well, we got the X-Bow, but there is a challenge. We need something for the digital part as well. Ships are not steel and kind of, well, mechanical parts, not only anymore. It's getting more and more digital and more connected. And of course, it's complex operations, so we need to make sure that these kind of operations and the digital systems work with people. So it's about the bridge and how you control the vessel, and it's all the different systems on board. So they designed, in cooperation with Arkitekthøgskolen in Oslo, a bridge vision concept, which was like massive when they released it a couple of years ago. It kind of took Ulstein as the kind of leading most innovator within their field. Really nice ideas. So kind of far-fetched, but so kind of, well, convincing as well. This was the reality. So it's like, well, this is the vision, this is the reality. And of course, it's extremely complex. Well, it's easy to make a vision when you leave all the constraints, all the legacy, all the things that are actually. One thing is, of course, it's complex. It's massive requirements and restrictions, IMO, etc., etc. And every delivery is tailored. It's not like off-the-shelf product. It's customized. And it's really expensive to make this system. So customization in itself is critical. Which means that things end up like this. Inconsistent, hard to use, loads of fails. Not good. And as of the brand, it's not something you want to show. Much cooler to show this, of course. Which, well, but the customer gets this, or the user. So we started the project with them, where they came to us with saying, we have the bridge vision, which has some nice ideas. We do have the existing apps, which have their, well, functionality and of course loads of man hours and brain power put into those. And of course we did use some new user insight as well. Spoke with captains and machinists, etc., to kind of fuel our inspiration. And we set out to create the Ulstein user experience, to define that. What's that about? And started out as some kind of a beginning of a whole system for making the whole ship kind of Ulstein. This is the starting point. And we defined some UX principles. Not going to dive into those, but these are like, of course, it's common within business world or the professional world as well. But I think we really pushed at this on the Jørgensen case, and it proved to be a great success. So focusing on UX principle, serve the expert user. Of course, it has to follow industry conventions, but challenge standards, be visionary, efficient rather than intuition, etc., etc. Some mood boards that we used to kind of to capture the mood that we wanted, and of course we had to comply with the the conventions and the things that you have to just follow, where we have experts that can know these things. Just showing those. Of course, bringing in some things that you'll see afterwards as well. 9 months, exactly the time it takes to actually give birth to something beautiful, and this was the result. And as I mentioned, things here are actually quite conventional. The things that user, it's tidied up. So it's made neat and it's consistent. The alerts and all the things that provide information are much easier to understand. And the organization of the whole layout is also much more intuitive. But basically, it's not we're trying to reinvent everything. But what has been a challenge, and is still a challenge, is alerts. There are like gazillions alerts from these systems, and you need to kind of know where this alert come from and how they kind of origin and what they are, etc. So we create this. I'm just going to skip through these. Are more like normal screens. It's a design system. So more like Lego blocks with explanations and rules for how you combine these into new systems. This is a star. So it's basically a dynamic way of seeing where our alarms origin. So this is completely new, and the users love it because now they have something familiar, and we're bringing something new that solved a problem for them, which hasn't been solved probably from before. So positive feedback, some words, happy customer. Yeah, and we designed a design system, of course, which speeds up the product development, and even the tech developers are happy. So now, over to the cool cases, where we kind of push the envelope a bit further. Not necessarily relevant from control rooms. It's not that you start off by thinking, now I'm going to make a consumer-oriented control room. Might be a TV app, I'm not sure. Anyway, so basically designing for consumers, but then adopted or maybe repositioned towards professionals, because you kind of open up new markets by doing so. And I guess that's maybe the strongest point for this approach. Started with a small case, Airthings, where we did brand design, UX, industrial design, the whole thing, which we often do. It's a radon measurement. Gosh, I'm not sure if, it's more like a smoke alert, but for radon instead. They've been quite technical things. It has matured. They managed to kind of miniaturize it and make sure that detection is transferred and presented to the user in a much more clever manner, both on the detector itself and on some app as well, of course. It's a bit more complex than a smoke detector, because it's about how much amount. It's okay to have some radon, but something about over time, how much, etc., before you take measures. So it's about kind of decomposing that complexity, making it really understandable for a consumer, so you can buy it just like he buys a smoke detector. Massive success globally. So now they've moved over to the professional market, because once they kind of established themselves in the consumer market, they got loads of attention for professional house builders, entrepreneurs, markets that was like hard for them to reach into. But now that they have a product which is like so discreet and so beautifully organized, and because we already started thinking about this option when we began the project, making the technology scalable and manageable in a whole ecosystem, they could easily kind of take this jump and expand into new professional markets. So Here we made an unobtrusive yet distinct design with a simple interface, consistent and well-designed user experience, a technology and design prepared for business-to-business markets or professional markets. But we, of course, need to kind of dullify it a bit. Took away the lightning ring and stuff like that, but still it's like basically the same kind of product moving into professional market and having huge competitive power because it's kind of designed for consumers. And the last case. Yeah. Anybody heard about Blueeye? Blueeye Robotics? Good. Some people. It's an underwater drone. It's basically, well, you know, drones in the air. They are quite common, but now people want to go underwater. So it's fairly new. It's been kind of released for pre-sale, but and the first products are shipping this autumn. So I'm going to talk you through this story, which it's actually a case where I was the design manager myself for the first couple of years of this company, trying to, well, manage the design activities that we did for them and make sure that they get the success that they deserve. And I would say that the key thing here is actually what I'm talking about. It's kind of mixing consumer experience with professional performance. So, well, what's their value proposition? It's basically that you have, well, premium design, performance, and technology to create a seaworthy and easy to use control underwater drone. And if it's seaworthy and easy to use and control, you can create an immersive experience. It's actually like being underwater without being there. And if you do that, you get this immersive experience. You can share it to your friends, family, and create further engagement. And then you start creating a community. And then you have something which is, wouldn't say viral, but there's something there, which is exciting. But of course, it starts with, of course, this combination between performance, technology, design, experience, etc., in order to make this real. With the slogan, "Your eyes below the surface." So these are the markets. It's kind of the exploration. That's one of the key markets. It's consumers. It's for you people who have a passion for the ocean. Maybe they're divers. Maybe they just want to go see what's underwater. But of course, then you also have these professional markets. For example, inspection, fish farming, search and rescue, ship and structures and inspection, etc. That also, of course, quite interesting. Yeah, just to give you an idea what it is, it's an underwater drone with loads of thrusters, which is connected by a cable, because wireless signals doesn't travel through water, so you need a cable. That's just physics. And then you got an app or an iPad in addition to a joystick. So you basically control it more or less like a game. So it's kind of gaming inspired as well. And there is a camera in front of it with lights, and it goes down to 150 meters. That's like 8 times as deep as a diver normally goes. And it's quite handy. So this is the kind of the idea. Of course, there are some competitors. You got the performance guys. These are the ROV guys in the market. They exist. They focus everything on performance, performance, performance. And niche markets, like each drone for each market, and they have this very good relationship with this one key customer, and they kind of make prototypes. It doesn't scale very well. Then, of course, you have the kind of cheap consumer drones that are popping up, quite many from China. They are, well, made to kind of enter the market at a very low cost, limited performance, and control if the weather conditions get bad, if it's currents, etc. So what we saw that there was a gap here. You had these guys focusing on lowest price, lowest performance, these guys focusing on the highest performance with no experience. We wanted to position a product in this kind of cross-section, which I think is a sweet spot. And it's, well, exactly the same, I guess, what DJI has done as well. This is the most successful aerial drone in the world, having 80% of the revenue in this market. So here we go. You got this one. And then you have the competitor here. So that's, how do we do this then? How much time? Okay, I'll speed up. Designing the big picture is all about coming in early, not just coming in, adding the glazing to the cake. So it's about this. It's about, well, us providing with the design perspectives, about the users, working closely with the people on technology. And they had the best there from experts from SINTEF and TNU and etc. And of course, you need some business knowledge as well. And of course, it's always good to feel that they have a greater purpose, something about society. I think all these components were part of this project. So this is what we do when we start with this kind of super holistic projects, where we, as designers, of course, we come with our form and craft. We make things, we shape things, make things, do insight work, materialize ideas into, well, products and services. And then, of course, we have design thinking. What are we going to make? And on top of this, we have, you might call it kind of strategic transformation, working with the different companies, Blueeye on this case, on a strategic level. What kind of company is Blueeye going to be tomorrow, 5 years' time? What kind of visions are we working on? What kind of markets, etc. So we did all this in parallel, which is not that often we get to do. But startups, of course, it's easier for them because they're small, more nimble, and can actually, do these things. So the brief was create a new kind of underwater drone to conquer the ocean, combining professional performance and robustness with consumer experience and ease of use, quite briefly. And this is their vision, which I think has this substance and purpose to it, which they live by. So we started focusing not on the technology, but on the experience. And not just experience there and then, but kind of the whole experience, from purchasing to support, potentially if things break, etc. In minute detail. And when we kind of captured this big picture, we had to start working on the details. And this is where tech developers and designers should work closely together. Because if you want to both optimize performance and the experience part as well, you have to make sure that you don't start compromising or having conflicting views on what you're aiming for. So we did strategy, we did the branding, we did the product design, the industrial design, and we did the digital UX design, and we had also some tech competence in. But of course, they also had loads of in-house tech competence in order to fulfill the ambitions. Made loads of iterations, both on the products. Used some game tech actually in order to create simulators, so we can try out different user interfaces in the beginning before the drone was ready. That was a challenge. We didn't have any drone, but we needed to test how it would feel to dive a drone. So we made Underwater World with game technology and kind of mocked it up, and it worked. And checked out different products. This is a kind of a nimble, agile way of working. Just checking out things, testing things, bringing in users and getting and focusing, of course, then not on the technology. That's crap. It's thrown away. But on the experience. What are we aiming for? What kind of experience do we want to create? We realized you get seriously seasick if you do with these kind of goggles, if you don't do some tricks. Things like that. Loads of testing out in the field when we started having drones. So it's a simple app, iOS, Android. And at the same time, there's a company in Trondheim as well, which are making some movie glasses, which we cooperate with in this project, called Movie Mask, which is perfect for this experience because it's not 3D, it's 2D, and you need this kind of wide view. It's just like being there. Yeah. So this is compared to the kind of if you saw the Pelicase versions, where you kind of have 2 thumbsticks and there's a screen and there's some 2 markers on depth and direction. This is completely different. This is kind of lowering the use threshold so that you don't need to be a trained professional or to start using it. And I think that's the key here, because, what we realized is that people who kind of sometimes just need to check something underwater, that's a huge market. kind of the day-to-day RV pilots that sit out in Nordsjön driving every day. Small niche market. But I need some eyes on the water. And of course, if that's not your job, it's something you just, well, do once in a month maybe. You need this low use threshold and robustness as well. And of course, everything neatly packed in a strong brand, which conveys the message and make it easy to communicate and attract investors, etc., which is important. Ready to order. So, last thing. Takeaway for Blueeye is that we, of course, well, cater for new markets, which wouldn't consider buying a drone. They are buying drones today. I think it's quite many drones being pre-sold already, several hundred, maybe 1,000. And we focus on user experience and ease of use as a key parameter differentiator compared to the professional ones. We had a strong brand and story, and of course, a consistent design across all touchpoints, from the app to the visual identity to the physical products to the services surrounding the product. Everything, it has the kind of Blueeye feel to it, and it just looks so much more trustworthy, credible, and professional. So I think that's the kind of the last takeaway from a project when it comes to applying kind of consumerism to something which is actually made for professionals in a strong manner, and having some success with that. Any questions? No? Thank you.